He was from Chicago. I think his name was Fred. And anyways, he had 6 restaurants that he owned. And what was interesting was he explained his journey to getting to restaurants. Well, I think I asked him actually because I was said, the restaurant business, that's a tough business. That's a real grind. And he said, oh yeah, absolutely. And I said, so how'd you get into it? And he said, well, and nothing was given to to Fred. He started off in one business, kind of at a university, and I can't remember what it was, but I know his second business was car washes, and I was thinking, oh, that probably did well. And he said, no, I had about 5 or 6 car washes, and oh, I know what the other business was. I'll tell you that in a second. So he had the car washes. They did kind of moderately well, but he said, there wasn't enough days in the year where where people would wash their vehicles, and so he ended up selling them, making a little bit of money. Then he got into the next business, which was portable, like outhouses or porta potties, if you will, right? Usually on construction sites. And I think he had about 500 to 700. And once again, the business just wasn't working the way that he thought. It didn't have the right leverage. And so he ended up selling out to one of his competitors. And then finally he got into restaurants. He said he met one of the founders of this restaurant. I can't remember what it's called, like Culverts or something to that effect. And he got his first restaurant, and he told me, and I'm just summarizing a little bit of this, that he essentially worked for 40 plus years and like 12-hour days at these restaurants. Now, when I started to ask him about the numbers, because I was like, I was just curious, like how big are the restaurants? Like 4,000 square feet, 4,200 square feet. He liked to own the land underneath it because that was really where a lot of the value was. Because we were talking about a McDonald's project that I'm working on, and so he said his numbers were he was all in on about 3.8 million, and they would be worth 6.5 million, right? So if you have 6 properties, and obviously you're going to pay down the debt, because I think he financed a lot of these over time, and so he amassed himself quite a nice net worth, and he would be probably in his 70s, I'm guessing, just based on how old his kids were and how old the grandkids were. And why am I telling all of you this, if you will? I just wrote a post on LinkedIn, and it talks about this concept of like choosing the right direction is far more important than just working hard, right? So Fred had worked super hard in all of his businesses, but he wasn't creating the wealth until he picked essentially the right business model for him. And I want to talk a little bit more about that, but I want to share one more story because like everything kind of came together, if you will, as I had a conversation with a lady last week who called me up and said, Shane, got your contact information from someone else in Calgary, and I'd really like to start building townhouses, right? Like inner city towns to develop and then rent out. I said, okay, well, tell me more about that. What are your numbers? What are you thinking? She didn't really know the numbers. That's why she was asking me. So we kind of went through them. And she said, I don't want to get into too much of the details because some of it was a little bit confidential, if you will. But at the end of it, she basically just asked, like, could you partner with me? And I said, it's possible. I said, what you see on the surface is not how people in development are successful, right? It's very easy to look at someone that's building or developing and just thinking that A, they're making money. That's not always the case. And B, that you could just go out and find, a 50 by 120 lot, slap up four, and, 4 up, 4 down, and it's going to do well, right? There are reasons why there are certain people, and I'm not going to give away their strategies because that's really what makes them unique. But I will just say that just because you have capital to deploy, that is not a competitive advantage. Maybe it will be, coming into 2023, 2024, when it becomes harder and harder to either A, finance, or B, just less investors out there to compete with. But by and large, you generally need some sort of a competitive advantage. And that competitive advantage is not created overnight, right? It takes a long time to really figure this out. And one of the realizations that I had in terms of my own journey being a developer, first, like residential, then I got into like value add, then I got into development. And I did a lot of different developments, right? We did resort developments out in Muskoka, over 1,100 acres. We did an industrial development, 3+ retail developments, I think, at this point. And now I'm into the, townhouses and multifamily. And at what I realized was I was jumping in to projects based on essentially like that I could make money. And that was kind of the criteria. It was not, do I have a competitive advantage? Is this something I want to do for the next 10, 15, 25 years, if you will? I would say for the most part, it sounded really cool to A, be a developer, and B, for me, right? I'm not suggesting that this is why other people do it. I'm just explaining why I got into it. And then I went down a path that really took me, in one case, like 8 years to get out of, right? Because in real estate, unlike the stock market, you can't just get in and out. I suppose you could, but you'll take a huge loss. And because I'm raising capital, I can't do that, right? So I have to really do what's right for my investors, which in some cases meant that I was on a plane 120 days a year and living away from my family. And so while from the outset it sounds cool to fly to Houston and Dallas and go to NFL games and go to fancy dinners and go to the gun range and do all these kind of interesting things, for me, that really wasn't what I wanted. I wanted to be at home. I really had to analyze. And one of my coaches, excuse me, he really kind of helped me to think this through in terms of like, what do you want? Why are you doing this? What's the end goal that you're after? And it couldn't be based on goals and values that other people had, because I think that that's one of the easiest traps to fall into, which is like following in the footsteps of someone else because we don't have to do thinking for ourselves, right? And that really kind of ties back to this concept of not just working hard for the sake of working hard, because I think that that's a given. You're going to have to work hard and grind regardless of what you get into. So why not take the time up front to really assess where you want to put that energy and attention, because you're probably going to be doing it for the next 10 or 15 years to really get to the top, right? To excel at it, if you will. And I think that that's, the ideas that I wanted to share here. I think one other thing is like the strategies that I've seen that have worked really well. I mean, you can certainly hire a coach or a mentor. Those are good. I think one that is probably often underutilized is just going for lunches or talking to people that are in the position that you think that you would want to be in. But beyond just talking to them is like observing how they interact in life, right? What's their relationship like with their kids? Are they divorced? Are they still married? Are they overweight? Are they fit? Do they have time to do things? Do they travel? What does their day-to-day life look like? And I can tell you, like when I was in commercial real estate in the brokerage world, I noticed that, at least, in the sphere that I was around, that the majority of like the top end producers, they were workaholics. And I can say that they made a lot of money, but it was not the type of lifestyle that I desired, right? And so that was really valuable for me to just like take a step back and say, if you're just chasing the money, then kind of what the price is to get there. But that was not the direction I wanted to go in. And so I veered off and almost like took 2 steps back to get to, essentially a lifestyle that was going to work for me. And I'll just kind of finish off with this last point. So, towards the end of my conversation with Fred, the gentleman at the pool that I was talking with in Palm Springs, he said, it was just kind of an offhand comment, but he said, Shane, I worked in the stores for 40 years. And he's like, about 80% of my time, I was at the takeout window taking orders. And so that tells you that this gentleman, like, not only did he like grind it out, but in order to make those stores a success, he was literally like serving food and taking orders. And so that, here's a guy that's maybe worth 10 to 20 million dollars based on what he kind of explained to me, and yet he's the guy handing out bags of food to people as they come through. And he did that not for 1 year or 10 years or 20 years, but for 40 years. And so just understanding what you're signing up for, I think, is pretty important. So hopefully that I know that that's not like how to invest in real estate, but I feel like I've got 190 episodes on investing in real estate. I think what's more important is just at least, on my own journey, sharing some insights that I find to be extremely valuable, because if I can save you 5 years of going down the wrong path, I think that that's pretty valuable. So anyways, hope you liked it. Have a great week. We'll see you next time. Bye for now.